Hi, I have watched a bunch of your debates, and I have some practical like advice or thoughts and stuff like that that I wanted to share. Because last time your chat roasted the fuck out of me for talking about stuff that was too abstract, so
Go for
I
it.
changed my game. Okay, uh, tariffs. Whenever they're brought up, there is a very good talking point against them that I have not seen you use in any of your debates against it for like the last month. Which is that yeah, you mentioned the thing about increasing prices, but I think another thing that is relevant is how it actually decreases jobs and actually loses American jobs, which is like one of the things that the tariffs are meant to do. Do you know about this argument or?
I mean, I can make it, but it requires, I think, a little bit of economic groundwork. So I tend to avoid those arguments because people are stupid as fuck.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think it's necessarily that complicated, right? I mean, the way it would just be said is that like, hey, we tariff them. Sure, that industry there's more jobs, but it's more expensive. But then every other industry that relies on that good now has a more expensive production
Yeah, I
process,
usually
which
I
is
say
gonna.
this a lot when we talk about localized losses and global gains. But the problem is that the response to that is going to be, okay, yeah, but when everybody is having all of their industries protected now, everybody's making more money. It's
You
it's
mean
you,
you mean if? Mhm.
It's that. So if you tariff a particular thing, especially something that's
Mhm.
early on in a lot of supply chains, and that thing becomes more expensive, then technically every single worker is hurt downstream from that supply chain, even though you're helping some workers. So you could say this,
Yeah.
you go like, okay, well, fine, sure, maybe it'll help these workers, but it'll hurt everybody else. But then the next response, because I've had this argument with people, the next response is, well, but everybody's going to have tariff jobs, so it's going to help all those people. It's just it's
Yeah, but then they're committing themselves to tariffs on basically everything, which I think
which
that
they're
they
already okay with Trump. They've already said they're
well.
okay with global tariffs. They want to be an autarky. They want everything manufactured in the United States.
To some extent, but I do think that there is a significant portion of people who are like, okay, I'm okay with significant tariffs, but I wouldn't be okay with tariffs on everything. And if I'm not mistaken, I remember when you bring it up to people, they are like, okay, tariffs on everything is dumb, but tariffs on specific industries might be good because X, Y, and Z reasons. So I think it's still a significant amount of people. Do you not think so?
No, I understand what you're saying, and it is true. But like, because I'll make this argument all the time, but then the problem is you just start to sound cold because like people will say, "Oh, what about how we hollowed out manufacturing to Detroit?" It's like, yeah, but the rest of the country is like buying all this stuff for way cheaper. It's helping everybody, but people don't see those gains because the gains are generalized, but they see the
Mhm.
losses because the losses are localized. So it just doesn't hit as hard. That's why people hate globalism and they hate free trade and they hate all this. And it's like, okay, well, you don't see all the gains being made. You just see like some cities that have suffered, and that's it. It's hard to get people on board
Yeah.
with the other thing because it requires a little bit more econ understanding.
But that's why I almost think, I mean, it's still going to go back if you think that people are fine with what, like tariffs on everything and there's not a significant difference there, then I mean, I guess that's the end of that. But that's why I generally think that taking it into the employment direction is a bit better, because that is more practical, that is more concrete, that is one of the main reasons why people talk about wanting to implement tariffs in the first place. But um, yeah, I
Sure.
guess it depends
I
on.
mean, show me, do a
Uh,
debate with somebody, show it to me, and I'll see it. But I feel like I've tried this in the past, and it's like, yeah, people just, yeah, it's hard for people to understand this shit.
Yeah, because specifically I'm thinking about the debate with the, I don't know what her real name was, but the Marjorie Taylor Greene admirer, and the tariffs are brought up there, but
Mm-hmm.
the employment argument wasn't. Okay, more generally, webbing, the stuff that you talk about. So I think you developed the webbing like a long time ago. Have you figured out any strategies to try to break the web or pick away with it, or is it just like I know that this is there, but I have no idea how to deal with it?
It probably depends on what the particular topic is or what the particular argument is.
Okay. Um, So I think that I think that there are kind of two ways to approach the web, and let me know if you've kind of actually no. What are the strategies that you have generally? Like the three most common ones you will use to address the web.
It just depends on how it comes up in an argument. Like if somebody tries to say like, oh, but like, aren't you guys? Don't you want trans 3-year-olds? I'll just say no. I don't support that position. I'm not going to defend it. Um, so or yeah, or the most effective way I have of like breaking through, if somebody tries to like wokeify me, or if somebody tries to like hypocritically, or if somebody tries to attack me on like woke hypocrisy, then I'll usually just like own whatever they're accusing me of to move the conversation forward. So in my Jubilee thing, for instance, I think the woman said something, or one of the women said something along the lines of like, "Oh, are you saying that are you misogynistic or do you not like women?" And I said like, "Yeah, half the time I don't. I just like move the
Yeah.
conversation forward and let them whatever instead of trying to like sit there and fight on the stupid claim, basically." Yeah.
Okay. Actually, I had forgotten that that's originally how you coined webbing, which is something that people do to you. But the way I see coming out more now is almost like people's own kind of like webs of beliefs where everything is like hyper connected. Maybe you have a different term for this, but like everything's the deep state and Fauci and the Democrats and Hillary Clinton's emails and everything like that. And they have like these like personal kind of like clusters of belief system where everything is vaguely connected in some way but not concretely. And if you go to any one of the points, they can connect it to everything else. Like these specific, like, I wouldn't say sophisticated because they're not rational in any way. They're not well structured, but like hyper dense and interconnected belief systems. Is the approach to that to try to like break the belief system, or to talk about like the individual like nodes or arguments for the things that they argue about?
I would have to ground it. It super depends on what we're talking about. Like, yeah, I would need examples. Like if somebody brings up a thing that is like webbed, if somebody brings up something like, oh, like I think that like black people don't have any disadvantages in society because of I don't even know. I don't know what example. I would need examples to ground this out. If somebody brings up like I think the JFK assassination was a giant hoax and we need to go back to the gold standard, that's going to be a whole different set of ways to deal with that. Then yeah, I don't think I could generalize an approach to this at all.
Okay, I see what you mean. Because one of the things I've noticed is that oftentimes, and I think you're very good at this, you want to get into specifics, which is good because they will bring something up or they will try to say a bunch of things. They will be like, okay, hold on, slow down, let's take it one by one. And you will try to like attack like a specific connection or a specific kind of like node in the web, whether that be like Hillary Clinton or Fauci or whatever it is, and explain why their opinion on that is unreasonable. But that tends to not be effective, right? Because in their mind, it's like, okay, we can do without Hillary Clinton, and my whole kind of like system of beliefs still kind of works well. So unless you have somebody like tied to a chair in a straitjacket, you're not going to have enough time to go through every single node to the point where the web will actually take substantial damage. So what I was thinking, and I'm wondering if this is something that you've tried before, is instead of trying to like snipe individual points in the node, trying to like sort of like weave the web up in and of itself to make it like completely incoherent, like within an argument. So I'm thinking stuff like, for instance, one of the things that people always say that are conservatives, they bring up BLM, right? Summer of Love, as like one of the biggest bads from the left from the past 4 years. But I think one of the, but then on the other side, they will also have this, belief of like being rabidly anti a bunch of different institutions, FDA, FTC, FBI, DOJ, CIA, all of these different things. And I'm wondering if instead of trying to target those in isolation and being like, okay, well, the BLM and having a big argument about them, and then having, okay, let's have an isolated conversation about the FDA, sure, they did this thing wrong, but instead trying to be like, okay, whoa, are you not kind of like the defunded police people? Like, you have a problem, with an institution just like they do, but instead of actually like being discreet and trying to work with it, you're just like the radical, insane left.
Yeah, but the difference is they think that their motivations are pure, so they're okay with it.
So you don't think that like, in some way at least, because it's like both of them are like such strong archetypes in their head of like things they ascribe to people and things that make up their core belief system, that there isn't at least some higher degree of cognitive dissonance there?
I feel like, like Elon Musk was literally on video finally owning the thing that I've been accusing him of being for so long, that conservatives fought against, where somebody was like, we need a George Soros on the left, and then Elon Musk raises his hand and everybody claps and it's like, okay, well, this is what I've been accusing of being forever. So I at this point, I don't think conservatives care, because the two things are that, one, they think that their motivations are more pure, and two, they think that the other side is already engaging in all of that bad behavior, so their engaging in it is justified as a response, basically.
Okay, I see what you mean. So in your view, there is essentially, because it sounds like there's almost no argumentative way to break through then, right?
It's like a whole combination of things. Yeah.
Okay. Well, I prepared something about that specifically in terms of, because I know you mentioned kind of like social spheres or sense of belongings and stuff like this. So I have something in the end for something I think the right is doing that the left isn't doing, that I'm interested to hear your opinion on. But
sure. Just to be clear, I don't think any of these are like bad ideas. It's just these are all things that are like working into, like, there are times when some of these are going to deploy, times when they're not, but these all work in tandem with like 5 or 6 other things. I don't think there's like a silver bullet for any of this, but yeah. But okay,
no,
yeah,
of course I understand, and I mean, I know that you've spent so much more.
Yeah, and I don't think you think that, yeah, but yeah.
Yeah, okay. Yeah, another thing that you could that could be interesting, and maybe could work, and I'm interested to hear your opinion on it, is that to kind of push back against the anti-institutionalism thing using like another aspects of the right-wing web. So part of it is BlackRock, Pfizer, like big companies controlling stuff like this. And I think that there is an argument in there somewhere. What, as soon as people bring up BlackRock or whatever big scary companies, you can make the argument that actually Trump's like militating against these institutions makes you as a people weaker. If you're afraid of these companies, like what's the only way you could ever bring them into check? It's by having strong and robust, institutions that the American people can kind of leverage through their elected representatives and stuff like this. And by being so anti-institutional, you're kind of also wanting to throw out whole institutions. You're throwing the baby out with the bathwater, and you don't really have the tools to be able to deal with these big scary companies that are meant to be a check when you are so anti-institutionalist as you are.
Yeah, but I think they think that the free market can solve that, but the government is worse because it can't go out of business because they steal your taxes at gunpoint. And then like they end up simping for huge big businesses because they they end up like how do you support Elon Musk, right?
Yeah, no, I mean I see what you mean, but from my understanding, I don't think I don't think the average like BlackRock conspiracy theorist believes that the free market will like eventually solve for BlackRock, right?
Well, they say that stuff like that should just be made illegal, so the government is making it illegal or something, or it can't be that big or something like that. Basically, yeah.
Okay, but and then don't you think that there is a connection between like the type of government you would need in order to be able to maybe do some kind of like antitrust in this direction is being undermined by a lot of the kind of MAGA anti-institutionalism, anti-regulation.
Yeah, but there's I mean, like, you should try these arguments against somebody. Everybody always has debate tips for me, and I wish I could see you try these in a live environment that you can watch somebody walk through, because it feels like I'm just, like, contrarianing you, but, like, I know all the dialogue trees for, like, these things. Like, having a government that bans certain types of regulation isn't the same as having a government that has 50 million new regulations, and banning this is actually better. I'm not saying all government is bad, just that right now we have a bureaucratic government with corrupt Faucis and blah, blah, blah. Like, I agree that everything you're saying is logically correct, but I think there's escapes for all of these things. You have to, like, hit them, like, in 20 different ways to get any of this to come through. You should try some of these, though. I think Rob Noor and there are other people that like Orbit Pisco and are in these servers that do like debates, but you should try some and then come back and report your, yeah.
I find, yeah, I don't do like YouTube and streaming, so I'm not in these spaces very much. I mean, I pay attention to your stuff, but I'm not spending time debating people online anymore. But who knows? Maybe I should. Maybe
Yeah, you
that's
should
a
try
great
it. See how they do it. Yeah.
Yeah, but so when you're talking about the things, like it's logical, but it's not going to land. Is that because it's not? Is that because it's not punchy enough? Is that because it's too complicated and it's not direct? Or like, what do you think is the major reason why stuff like this won't land?
So if I were to tell somebody, how are you going to regulate big businesses by defunding the whole government? I think the answer is just going to be, well, I just won't defund those parts.
Okay.
Or it'll be the only reason these businesses have gotten so corrupt is because of government corruption anyways, given them all this power.
Okay. I think that, I mean, the way I would see this, being employed if you want to be brutally effective is just like going back to the question of like, if they try to be like, okay, the government propped them up in this way, or trying to like if they go any other path than saying that, oh, we want to fund those parts of the government. I mean, it feels like the question that needs to be asked over and over is like, okay, like how are you going to tackle BlackRock without institutions? How are you going to do it? And just like asking that question over and over again until they eventually be like, okay, we're not going to defund like those parts of the government. And then, I mean, I'm sure that there has to be some kind of like a
the problem is they always allude to like the like Cenk did this too in a conversation I had this morning. Pegman will probably post. They always do this where they're like, we're just going to go line by line through the budget and cut the inefficiencies, or we're just going to get rid of the people that are bad but keep the people that are good. And they'll never be able to give you anything more specific than that. Like that's all they'll say. Like obviously some government regulation is good and we'll keep that, but there's a lot of red tape and bureaucratic, because there are a lot of debates where I ask somebody, I'm like, can you give me one regulation that Trump cut or one thing that you think should change? And they never have a specific. And it's always like, well, I don't know anything particularly about that. I could look that up later for you, and that's it. So it's like, yeah.
Okay. I didn't go this far, but let's say that was the case that, on Trump's platform or during his previous, presidency or whatever, he removed the anti-big multinational evil business law that allowed the government to, do antitrust against companies like BlackRock, for instance. Wouldn't it be like in that case, if you could be like, okay, how are you going to do it without institutions? How are you going to do it? They're like, okay, fine, it won't be those parts of the government. And then you're like, oh, but like Trump, like literally removed the exact tool you would be able to use to do this. Do you think that would still be effective? Like, would be effective enough in that case?
I mean, I try. There's always an excuse. Like over all the stuff that Trump wanted to do, Like I've literally said, like Trump tried to repeal and replace like the ACA, and now he's saying that he likes pre-existing conditions, and they're like, oh, okay, well he changed his mind, he can do that. Or like Trump literally said he was going to do all these things at the border, and he didn't get anything done. Well, that was because of the deep state. Okay, well Trump literally tried to do XYZ that he had the ability to do, but like he couldn't get anybody to go along with him. It was like, well, that's because he didn't choose the right people. Like there's an infinite amount of excuses. Like if you think about one single thing that a conservative will blame on Trump that he's ever done ever that's bad. There's nothing in the zeitgeist of conservative media where like, yeah, Trump did mess this up. Not a single thing. The only mistake he's ever made is not having people who are sycophantic around him. The only mistake he's ever made is having people that aren't like, it's the bureaucrats and the deep state that's stopping him. That's like the reason why he hasn't done anything. Yeah. It's always an escape, yeah. Again, like I've used like combinations of things you're saying. It's just like all in tandem working, and it's just like a lot of like at my Jubilee, one of the things that some guy said to me was literally like, you said they broke the laws creating fake slates of electors. Which laws did they break in like Georgia? And I'm like, well, I mean, you need the certificate of ascertainment. And he's like, no. Which law did they break? I'm like, are you asking? Do you mean like the penal code? And he's like, yes. And I'm like, I don't know. And he's like, oh, so then how am I supposed to believe you? And it's like, okay, like this is stupid.
No, yeah, I mean, obviously, I'm not gonna defend that, and I think there are ways to wiggle out of all of them. But yeah, okay. So that one not very effective. Okay, I have one more specific one, and then I have like the big picture thing. The more specific one is this was when you and Pisco, you were on Twitter Spaces, and then there was a question about the Patriot Act and everything, in a way that, oh, this is a democratic thing, and Trump would do better. I don't remember exactly how you responded to this, but I feel like there's a, like if you want to be rough with somebody and force them into answering something, there's like a chain of dialogue that goes from, okay, if you're worried about kind of infringements on kind of citizens' privacy and general civil rights and stuff like that, when Trump talks about the enemy, from within, and talks and floats about the idea of using the military against them, there are kind of like three options for somebody who's a Trump supporting but also claims to be concerned about this. They can either say, number one, that actually Trump will not be better from a perspective of being worried about the Patriot Act, because he's very willing to engage in kind of clampdowns on and domestic espionage against enemies that are domestic and that are U.S. citizens. Or number two, Trump fearmongers about a threat from an enemy within that's so bad that like the military has to be used. But he won't spy on them or use the Patriot Act, in which case, like, okay, either the way he's describing it is out of scale, or he's allowing a danger to you, the American people, that he clearly thinks is bad enough that the military could be used, but he won't even use something like the Patriot Act. Like, what the fuck is up with that? He's clearly a bad politician. He's not representing you. Or number three, you don't actually think it's a problem, and you're actually pro-surveillance state if it's against the right people. And I think that no matter which one they pick, it's going to be a big complicator, or there's a big bullet to bite. What do you think?
Yeah, you should try it. They'll just own it and it'll be fine. They won't care. They'll own it and they'll say, yeah, I do think there are some people the military should go after. 100%. I mean, you see people like Tim Pool and was Tim Pool the one who tweeted it, or was it Vivek? There was a big, oh no, it might have been Elon saying like, we're going to use the police to go after people who spread misinformation or some bull. I was like, wait a second. I thought people got mad at me. Aren't people getting mad at me right now because I said I don't want disinformation online? And like, so there are no values there. They'll just say, oh, well, when we do it, it's actually okay because we have good reasons to do it, and that's it. And you can just keep fighting through that. But
do you think there's a difference when that comes up in kind of like a disconnected context, and they don't have sufficient amounts of synapses to connect the two together, and it might be different if you like explicitly put those in conversation with each other, like at the moment, like the worry about the surveillance state and the comments that have been made about the enemies, like that they're both occupying the space at the front of the mind at the same time, instead of them being in like different contexts. When it's easier to like miss contradictions in belief systems and in things that you have.
Maybe, but I think the thing is that like when it comes up, if you bring up that it's related to Trump, they'll just 180 on it with no shame. But I don't know. I'm going to try it or think about it more.
Well, at least then you would get them to buy it on the fact that like, okay, you don't have a problem with the surveillance state, which it feels like it clashes with a lot of like the deep state, whatever things that they're doing. But yeah. Okay. I mean, general vibe that talking points are going to be difficult. So the big thing, I think that this is one of the major things that are significantly missing from the left and the liberal media sphere, is that I don't think the left and the liberal have like a coherent, a strong, and a simple narrative in terms of like what's going on in the country. And I think that this is, obviously shown in terms of the fact that I think a lot of conservative belief systems, everything kind of works together. They have this predetermined heuristic where basically any belief can be put in. But in a liberal system, there isn't really like the same amount of thing. So I have a bit of a thing written out here about, like what separates a narrative from a set of fact, which is that, a narrative is this kind of general heuristics that allows you to quickly situate new knowledge and situations and have a ready to go explanation for almost everything. Is this a good epistemological process? Absolutely not. I mean, ideally, you want to analyze everything discretely, but it's kind of like an inductive shortcut in that way. But most people, they simply just they cannot analyze everything themselves, and like having this kind of like narrative of this big picture meta heuristic, I think is something that's very important. And I don't think the left has anything like that at all, in terms of like what the right does. Is this something you've come to as well, or?
Yeah, I think you can create punchy things on your side, but obviously you're making logical sacrifices to make them, having your little like punchy explainers. Yeah, but I think it's probably important to do. Yeah.
I think it's necessary, and I think it also comes back to, I think this is something that you often say, that there is no virtue in like losing because you refuse to apply like a certain degree of tactic when your opponent is doing it. It's not like a virtuous thing to stick to some higher standard of behavior if it's costing you everything.
Mm-hmm.
And I think it is costing you everything because, I mean, to be honest, I mean, the vast majority of people, in the current situation of the United States, they I don't think it's possible to have like an engagement in politics that doesn't revolve around a big narrative. And by not having one, you're losing out on like a huge amount of people.
Yeah, I think narratives are important. It's one of the reasons why going forward, I'm trying to be more constructive, positive. I'm working. That's the thing I'm thinking of. And reading all this stuff about the U.S., like I think I've given much more positive cases recently over things like taxation or structure of government or or like foreign affairs for the U.S. Like yeah, I'm doing that more. But
Okay, I'm gonna be a bit cynical here, which is that I don't necessarily know if like like a positive message in this way like is what I'm talking about and what I think is necessary. I think that there are a few things that really characterize a good narrative, and I think that the right has this in spades. And it's things like a sense of urgency and a threat, a clear divide between good and bad, us and them, with a clearly like defined self-identity, and the kind of frequent invocation of tropes in the narrative, underdog versus giant,
mhm.
integrity versus depravity, stuff like this. And I don't think the left has basically any of that at the moment. And if
Yeah,
you
this
just
is
have this
something I talk
hopeful
about when I talk
message
about
to
like in
them,
group, out group. The right is very good at having their in group and they make people the out group. And I think the left can do that better. I think the issue is a lot of our in group just hates us because they don't support the candidate or the party. So a lot of the in group on the left includes people like socialists or tankies or progressives or woke scolds or center left like Dems. And a lot of these people are at ends with each other. So our in group is very confusing, meaning that we don't have a good like othering for the out group. And then we don't have very good strength in our in group. So, yeah.
I think that this is something though that isn't just, something that needs to improve, but I think something that, you particularly can have a really big role in informing because of, your platform, the Eclipse Industrial Complex and everything.
Mm-hmm.
And I mean, I think if you look at a lot of your opening statements, generally, especially compared to right-leaning and MAGA people, there is a lack of a broader narrative. You talk about the specific facts, you talk about,
What was the
maybe you
most
give a
recent debate of
timeline.
mine you watched?
Uh, Let me open your YouTube. Do you have one in mind where you feel like you did it well, or?
I feel like generally when I'm trying to make opening statements, if I have the chance to write it out in advance, I do try to keep this like meta narrative of like what are the things that I'm pushing for, at least more than I used to.
Because when I'm thinking about it, is that, well, I think maybe this is something you've gotten better on, and maybe I'm just traumatized from that one 2v2 debate we did where you didn't prepare shit. But
Based.
there was but you generally, sometimes you don't even have like a particular opening statement. You're just like, yeah, like I'd rather go into the open and direct conversation,
Mm-hmm.
which
Although
is fine.
usually,
It
if I
makes sense.
know now there's going to be an opening, I'll usually write one out because you have to lay all of your shit out in your constructive positive argument plus your meta narrative is good to lay out. If the other person lays one out and you don't, then you're kind of at a disadvantage. Yeah.
But even then, I feel like when you do lay it out, I realize I didn't answer your question. I'm kind of through the Vivek fan debate, but I didn't make it all the way through. The Trump hired homosexuals, whatever. But that's a Twitter space, so that doesn't make sense. Probably the Marjorie Taylor Greene debate, which is the one I looked more specifically about as well, or the Marjorie Taylor Greene fan one.
Mm-hmm.
And in that one, yeah, I don't think that there was much of an opening statement, but it was also like a politer conversation, I guess.
Mm-hmm.
But I think even when you do, from my memory, go into a bit of further detail and stuff like this, it's usually kind of like about specifically what you're talking about. So if you're having a January 6th debate, you will spend a lot of time going through, like whatever the timeline of everything, including the electors scheme and everything like that. Maybe sometimes you will go like 1 degree of separation further and draw that into a general comment about Trump or about MAGA. But I think it needs to go even further. It needs to be like a huge narrative. It needs to be like, oh, it's the most recent example in a string of situations in which I think it needs to be a lot bigger. I think the narrative needs to be much larger, and I think that get your best DGG creative writers on this, and if you have like a big, huge meta narrative that you try to tap into in the beginning or like throughout all of your debates, I think that can make a significant difference because the left has no meta narrative at the moment.
Sure. Yeah, I agree. Yeah.
Okay. I think those are the main things I have prepared. So hopefully this more practical thing is better than abstract ethical discussions about international relations.
Okay.
But yeah.
All right. Well, I love you. Anything else?
No, I'll let you know if I, for some reason, decide to stick my head in the septic waste tank that is online debates again and try these talking points. But
good luck. Let me know. Keep me updated, okay?
All right.
Okay.
Bye-bye.
Be careful.
Bye.
I appreciate that, Destiny.
All right. Bye.
Remember to hit that like and subscribe, and don't forget the notification bell so that my videos show up right in your feed.